We're recording the interview of Bob Mowry.
Maury.
This interview is being conducted by David Barry from the Wright State University's Veteran Voices Project. This interview is being recorded at the Doubletree Hilton Hotel in Miamisburg, Ohio. It is 11:30 a.m. on September 13th, 2019. Why don't we start with where and when were you born?
I was born in Tipton, Iowa on May 9th, 1934.
And who were your parents and what were their occupation?
My father was Daniel Mowry and my mother was Lucille Morden Mowry. My father was a chef by trade. My mother was a bookkeeper.
And did you have any siblings?
I had a brother who passed away before I was a year old.
Sorry to hear that.
And I have had a sister then that I grew up with.
And then did any of your family members serve in the military as well?
My father was in the Navy.
And what were you doing before you joined the military?
I had just gotten out of high school and I was working in a grocery store as a meat cutter.
So,
And
okay. No problems.
I took off on a Monday and went to Waterloo, Iowa to try and get a job with Rath Packing as a meat salesman. I thought I wanted to be a meat salesman. And they said, come back when you're 21 and have your military service out of the way. The following Monday I took off and I went and I joined the Navy.
So, why the Navy? Was it because that's what your father did, or?
Yes and no, but that's just kind of where I thought the service I'd want to be in.
So, just off the experience of going and trying to sell meat, and them telling you should come back with military service, was that all it took to get you to go sign up? Or?
Well, I knew that if you weren't married or weren't going to college, you would end up being drafted. I knew that would, and I didn't want to be drafted into the Army, I guess.
Oh, okay. So, what year did you join the Navy then?
1952.
So you, how did your family feel about you joining?
No problem. Didn't bother.
So did you signed up for the Navy? Did you have a pretty long dwell time before you left for basic training, or did you leave?
It was about 3 weeks after I joined that I was called to report for physical. I went by bus to Des Moines for physical, and from there I went by train to San Diego to boot camp.
And how was boot camp for you?
That was good. I was in a honor company. Our company I was in was an honor company, so it was a good experience.
Now, what does that mean to be in an honor company?
Well, there were a number of different companies in boot camp, and we were just a good company in our drills and everything. Boot camp was different, certainly. You washed your clothes out of a bucket and we lived out of a sea bag. We didn't have lockers. We had a sea bag, and so all our clothing had to be rolled and tied with rope, which was different.
How was it adjusting to being in the military?
Of course, the first few weeks, you were homesick, but it wasn't bad. I enjoyed it. I had good friends, made good friends, and.
So, did you get to choose your job while you're in basic training, or did
No,
you do it beforehand or afterwards?
No, I did not have choice. when boot camp was over, I received my orders to go to Special Weapons Unit 1233 at Sandia Base in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And of course, being 18 years old and still wet behind the ears, I had no idea what a special weapons was. Was it a gun that shot around the corner or what? I had no idea. When I got to Albuquerque, shortly after I was there, I had a security briefing, and that was in February of 1953, and Julius and Ethel Rosenberg had just been convicted of treason and sentenced to die. So that put the fear of God in you. You don't talk about what you do or what you see here. And that was, and then when I was there in the unit, I went to school or class to learn to work on atomic weapons. I was also appointed the mail orderly for our unit, so I handled all the mail for the unit and the personnel in our unit. I did receive a letter of commendation from the commander of the unit for a job, the Navy tradition of a job well done, handling the under most difficult situation. And in the letter it states that I also got a high recommendation from the base general. And Sandia Base was an armed forces base. It was mostly Army and Navy, or mostly Army and Air Force. There was 3 Navy units that stationed there at the time.
What did you win that award for? Just doing the mail, or?
Yes, handling the mail in a difficult situation, because the Navy unit was just a small unit in a large base, and that's what for. I did a good job taking care of the mail, I guess.
Yeah, they had given me that assignment when I was in Afghanistan to handle all the mail that was coming into our base, and I became very popular because I always whenever someone had to come see me for something, it was good news because they had a package or something.
Yeah.
Did you experience the same?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Where did I go there? In I believe it was October 1953. One of the special weapons units was moved from Sandia Base to Norfolk, Virginia, and became Special Weapons Unit Atlantic Fleet. The other unit was moved to San Diego, California, and became Special Weapons Unit Pacific Fleet. The unit I was in, Special Weapons Unit 1233, was disbanded, and we were some went to both of those other units that were transferred. Others of us, like myself, was assigned to another base, and I was transferred to Skiss Creek Annex, Navy Mine Depot in Yorktown, Virginia. And the annex was just an annex to the mine depot. Annex people were allowed on the mine depot, but mine depot personnel were not allowed on the annex. The annex was a storage site for special weapons, atomic bombs. It was not a big place at all. There was 2 barracks, one Navy barracks and a Marine barracks. The Marine was a guard company was stationed there. They guarded the base. There was an administration building, a fire station, and a mess hall, and that was all that was on the annex proper, so to speak. We had open gangway other than when you had duty on a given day, night or weekend if you had duty. I worked we went from the barracks by bus and we had to go through another guard gate. We turned in our badge and picked up another badge and went to our workstation, which was a underground igloo, if you will. And I worked in a mechanical bay where atomic bombs were brought into the bay. There was 3 different bays, and I was in one bay. We had a warrant officer was our chief warrant officer was our hook officer. We had a chief petty officer was the crew chief, and then there was a first class boatswain mate, a second class boatswain mate, a first class IC, and myself as a seaman. And atomic bombs were brought in. We disassembled them, tested them, put them back together, and put them back in storage. The chief had a clipboard and there was a checklist on everything you had to do, check off when working on the bombs. The 4 of us all did the same thing, except when it was after the day was over and it was time to sweep down. I always got to sweep down because I was a seaman and they were all petty officers. The other 3 were all petty officers, so I always got to sweep down the bay when we were done. We ate down there, and we had an hour or so at noon, and we used to play volleyball out in the yards. But the storage site was all the buildings were underground. It was so that's what I did. I was there for 2.5 years, I guess, and then I received orders to. While I was there, I had requested sea duty a couple different times, and was denied sea duty. They always said the only way you got out of the project was by screwing up, and that wasn't the way to get out of the project. Anyway, in the spring of 1956, I received orders to go to be transferred to headquarters, Joint Task Force 7 in Anahuac Atoll in the Marshall Islands. I traveled to San Francisco. I went on leave and then reported out to San Francisco. I flew from San Francisco to Hawaii, spent 2 days in Hawaii, and then flew to Kwajalein, where I spent 2 weeks, and I think it was 2 weeks, might have even been 3 weeks, I'm not sure, in Kwajalein, waiting to fly to Anahuac when headquarters was located at the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. And when they all came out, then I flew over, and there was 2 other seamen like myself. They came from Lake Mead, Navy. It was an I'm not sure what it was called, but it was a Navy base in Lake Mead, Nevada. It was a storage site also. And they joined me. And then there was a first class boatswain mate who was, well, first of all, I should say, Joint Task Force 7 was the Army, Navy, Air Force Atomic Energy Commission. And the commander was a Navy Rear Admiral. And there was a Brigadier General from the Army, a Brigadier General from the Air Force, and another Rear Admiral were all on his staff. And the 3 of us were assigned to the Admiral's barge. And his driver back in Washington, D.C. was a first-class boatswain mate, and a first-class boatswain mate, knew how to run a boat. The 3 of us were not there because of our seamanship, but we were all there because we had a top-secret clearance. And this boatswain mate taught us how to run the Admiral's barge, which was shipped from Hawaii to Anahuac. The Admiral had a command ship there in the atoll, but the headquarters was there was Anahuac Atoll, or Anahuac Island, Then there, just up a little ways, there was another island, Perry Island, and that's where the headquarters for Joint Task Force 7 was located. And we hauled the Admiral and his staff from Anahuac to Perry Island, out to his ship. There was another island, Japtan Island, which was kind of a recreational island. When, for example, we had visitors, Secretary of Defense Charles Wilson was Secretary of Defense at that time, was a visitor there for a test. And the Admiral had a picnic over on Japtan Island for him and other visitors that were, I just remember him by name. Yeah. And anyway, we operated the Admiral's barge. We anchored it to a buoy out in the lagoon right off the dock, and we swam, dove off the boat, swam, brought it in the dock, cleaned it up, kept it clean, ready to go whenever he or any of his staff wanted transportation from Perry Island over to Anahuac, which was the big island, which the Army and Air Force were all over there. The unique thing about, we lived in wooden frame tents, and we had a little wooden porch on the front of our tent, and we had a box, probably 3 by 3, I would guess, and we had 2 5-gallon lard cans, and we insulated the box, and we had these 2, and there was 2 ice machines on the station, or on the island, so we had cold beer and mix on ice at our tent all the time. But another unique thing about it was there was no military mess facility. Holmes and Narver Construction out of Los Angeles was also headquartered on that on Perry Island, and they had a mess facility. And I got paid $5.40 a day per diem because there was no military mess facility. And we paid Holmes and Narver $1.90 a day to eat in their mess hall. And they also did our laundry for free. Wow. So I made more money off my per diem than my salary as a seaman in the Navy at that time. And then, of course, we went to had movies every night, you know, and once a week they backed a 2.5-ton truck off a landing craft, and you could buy a case of beer, or you could buy a 5th of whiskey. And so I was not a beer drinker, so I bought Seagram's VO for $1.80 a 5th. And like I said, we had cold beer and ice and unmixed at our tent all the time. So anyway, when the day of a test, which were always held pre-dawn, they would come around with a fire truck blowing its sirens to get us up. And we'd get up, get dressed, and roll the sides of our tent up just so it wouldn't get blown over. And we would muster down on the beach whenever there was an atomic test. Some of the times we had some goggles, and not enough for all of us, so, but if you had a pair of goggles, you could look directly at ground zero. If you did not have goggles, you had to cover your eyes and your arms and turn your back to ground zero. There was 11 atomic tests in Anahuac and 6 up at Bikini. The ones up at Bikini, I think, were mostly hydrogen bomb tests. The first hydrogen bomb dropped from a plane was in Operation Red Wing in 1956. There had been hydrogen bomb tests before, but they had never dropped one from a plane until 1956. The closest was the ones in Anahuac were like 7-8 miles away from where we were at. it was, like I said, pre-dawn when the test went off, and just like that, it was as bright as noon, daylight. It was just light everywhere when a shot went off, and you saw the flash and the I don't know how you describe it, the fireball, the mushroom cloud rising, and the spectacular. That's all the way of saying it. You saw that, and then you heard the rumble of the blasts, and then the last thing you saw was the shock wave as it came across the water. You could see it coming across the water, and just watch that mushroom cloud and the thing as it rose and dispersed, and looked to see which direction it would go. Was it coming over us, or what direction was it flowing as it went apart? So.
Now, were you far enough away that you didn't have to worry about radiation, or is that still a concern?
No, yeah, we did have film badges that we wore. We were issued film badges that we wore. It really didn't mean a lot to us. We didn't wear them all the time. As I think back now, and of course we swam in the lagoon waters all the time, you know, and because when we just had the barge tied up to a buoy, and we'd have to call for goes on land and water.
Vivian?
No, you know what I mean.
Yeah, I know.
I can't think of the name of it now. But anyway, they come pick us up and take us on shore then, you know. And but we swam out there all the time while we were waiting around and so forth. And so how much radiation did I get? I have a record at home that I got from Department of Energy. I think it was called at that time. I have a printout on how much radiation, ionized radiation, I received while I was over there. And of course, we all know that ionized radiation causes cancer, even though the government for years denied any connection. When we said, what was the government's motto was delay and deny until they all die, I think, was their motto for many years. Then eventually they recognized that ionized radiation caused cancer, and now today I guess there are 20 cancers that are presumed to have been caused by ionized radiation. I have been very fortunate, I think, that I've not ever had any
That's great.
cancer. I've had cancer, but not the cancer I had is not one of the 20 that are presumptive to be.
That's good. When you were taking apart and testing the nuclear weapons early on in your military career, did you have any specialized training for that, or did you just kind of get thrown into it and told what to do?
For the tests?
Yes. Or for the
Or when you were working
When I was working on atomic bombs, I had gone to school in that at Sandia Base.
Okay.
I went to school there to learn how to. It was a mechanical school, I guess that's what you would call it. Yeah, I learned how to do it. When I was in, there was not that many different atomic bombs like there were after I was out. They have all kinds of warheads and so forth. There was the Fat Man, the Little Boy. They were Mark 6, Mark 4. There was a Mark 5. There was a Mark 7, and then there was the Army had a Mark 9, which was an atomic shell. The Army had a cannon that shot an atomic shell, and we had those in our stores, and so we worked on those. So we disassembled them and checked them also for make sure that all the electricals, everything was working right. Yeah. Did you know there was a?
No, I did not know that we had a cannon.
The Army had an atomic cannon.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I don't know what they would have ever done. It shot a shell that was an atomic bomb, and I don't know how far it would shoot it, but probably would have come back and wiped out the cannon. I don't know. But anyway, I worked on all those. Just before I left, we did have some hydrogen bomb warheads that we worked on.
And were you married during your time in the military
No.
service?
No.
When you were out, did you find it hard? Because I'm sure everything was classified.
Yes.
Keeping the secret from your family, or later on from your loved ones.
Well, you never talked about it because you were sworn to secrecy, and so I had 5 kids. My kids all knew I was in the Navy, but they never. That's all. They just knew I was in the Navy. They never knew what I did.
Did you tell them later on after it became declassified?
Well, of course they were all adults and gone, and they could. No big deal. But yes, I have told them. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Huh? Well,
And
when
when they were younger, we did take a trip to Washington D.C. and went down through Yorktown, and I showed them the base where I was stationed there. But I still didn't tell them what I did there. Just that's where I was at.
So did you finish up your Navy career working for the Admiral, or did you go on after
That was my last duty. Yes. From there, I went to San Francisco to Treasure Island, where I was discharged. That was my last tour duty. Was there, working for the Admiral.
And then what did you do after your military service?
Well, I went to school for 3 years, and then got married, and I was going to school at Iowa State Teachers College, and I still had a year and a half to go a year and a summer to go when I got married, and so I got a job. I got married in the fall, and I got a job that fall, and planning on going back in the spring. And beginning teachers were being signed for $3,900 a year, and I got a job as a salesman making $100 a week, and bought a car, and so on and so forth. So I never got back to college. So I was a fresh fruit and vegetable and a grocery salesman for 4 years, and lived in Owine, Iowa. And then I moved from Owine to Loudon, Iowa, and I had learned to cut meat when I was in high school, and I took over a locker plant, and I ran a locker plant for 7 years, and then I went to work for almost 7 years, I guess. When I was 35 years old, I went to work for Oscar Mayer Foods in Davenport as a production supervisor, and I retired from Oscar Mayer Foods as a production supervisor.
I am curious. Did you ever go back to that the meat stand or the meat selling place that you wanted to work for originally and show them your military stuff?
No, I did not. No. Like I said, I got another salesman after the job, and then I went into had my own locker plant for 7 years. I went back to the meat business, and then ended up at Oscar Mayer Foods.
And then did you have any issues transitioning back to the civilian world after your military career?
No, not really. No. It was. Most of my classmates by then had gone to college. Most of my classmates out of high school went to college or got married. There were not too many in my class class of 52 that actually were in the military. There was 2 other of my friends were in the Navy, and a couple were in the Army after they went to ROTC in college, I guess. But
Did any of your children follow in your footsteps?
no. I have 1 son and 4 daughters, and I kind of thankful that when my son was of the military age, the draft wasn't in existence, where they weren't drafting anyone anyway at that time. And he went to college for 4 years and then went out. He coaches college basketball, and he graduated in 1984, and all he's ever done is coach college basketball. It's kind of different.
Okay. Well, I only have a couple more questions left
Okay.
for you. Do you feel there's anything that we haven't talked about or should be added to this interview?
No, except that having seen 17 atomic bomb tests, I certainly don't believe we need to test anymore. And hopefully no one ever sees one used in a war or hostile environment, because the destruction is just unbelievable, I think. I am a firm believer, I guess, that we have enough. I know we've gotten rid of a lot of them, but I know we still have enough that we don't need more.
And then, what were some life lessons that you learned from your military experience?
Well, I think growing up and in the military, hard work pays off. Everybody has to do their share, and that's something I always tried to pass on to my children, was that hard work is good for you.
Well, I only have one question left then. What message would you like to leave behind for future generations who review this interview?
Be proud of your country. If you have the opportunity to serve your country, to do so, and that always look out for your fellow man, serve your fellow man. That's about it, I guess.
All right. Well, this concludes our interview, and I just want to say thank you for taking the time to do this interview, and thank you for your service.
Thank you.